Hello again, and happy Saturday from Metro Manila, the Philippines, Southeastern Asia. Just 10 and a half months after the previous school massacre, Finland, my distant native land in Northern Europe, where I was still living at the time, and I was in my second year of a 2-year substitute teaching job at a senior high school in the Helsinki region of southern Finland, teaching history and social sciences. Finland was rocked by another mass school shooting, that time at a polytechnic college in the city of Kauhajoki in western Finland. Mr. Matti Saari, who was a hospitality student there, meaning he was going to studying to become a restaurant employee, shot in cold blood one teacher and 9 fellow students before turning his gun on himself. So the number of deceased victims was one higher than it had been 10 and a half months earlier in the Jokela or Tuusula school shooting in the Helsinki region of southern Finland. Who was Mr. Saari? He was a 22-year-old student. His motives were similar to those of the previous Finnish school shooter, Mr. Pekka Erik Alvinen. He hated the human race. He had also written on the internet, the solution is Walter or Walther 22. 8 of the fellow students whom he killed were women. 1 was a man, and then 1 was a male teacher. And just like Mr. Alvinen, he committed suicide by shooting himself after the rampage. Yeah, in this article of Murderpedia, he is called a culinary arts student. And coming less than a year after the previous mass school shooting, obviously it caused a great deal of fear and anguish in Finland. Let's look at his Wikipedia article. Okay, the Kauhajoki school shooting. Yeah, no, I'll have to turn to the Finnish Wikipedia article. Apparently. He had been born in May 1986, and he was a second-year culinary arts student at the Polytechnic College of Seinäjoki, whose Kauhajoki campus he was living on. Apparently, before this murderous rampage, he had never been convicted of any crimes except for one drunk driving incident. He actively used several internet services like the IRC Gallery, MySpace, and YouTube. He also participated on weblog chats where school shootings were admired. On the internet, he confessed that he was an atheist and a misanthropist, in other words, a hater of other human beings. And he identified as his hobbies the computer, drums, and shooting. He also told that he was listening to heavy metal music, or preferred to listen to heavy metal music and to watch horror movies. He neither was dating any woman nor did he want to beget any children. After the shooting rampage, police officers found at his home a message where he, for example, told that he hated the humanity and human race and had planned this murderous rampage already since 2002. He had been described with an antidepressant called SSRI. In addition, he was suffering from panic or anxiety attacks and was on another medication. Sadly, just one day before the shooting rampage, a Finnish police officer seriously talked with him and decided not to confiscate the gun that he was using. If that gun had been confiscated, chances are that this shooting rampage at least would not have occurred on that day. And in retrospect, the police officer not only should have confiscated the gun, but should also have detained Mr. Saari and charged him with planning to murder other people. But after these incidents, police officers have established these internet monitoring units in Finland and many other countries, whose primary purpose is to prevent these shooting rampages before they actually happen. Most of the time they are successful, sadly, not always. He had several siblings and half-siblings. His family often moved from one city or town to another before settling in Pyhäjärvi, northern Ostrobothnia. He attended at least 3 grade schools. When he was 17 years old, his 21-year-old big brother died of a heart ailment. He also started senior high school, but was not a successful student there. Apparently, he either lacked the motivation to keep studying or then was more gifted in other fields. Then he started to study at a vocational college on the catering line, and there he succeeded. He also then later switched to that polytechnic college where he was studying at the time of the shooting. In 2006, he already became some sort of junior restaurant supervisor. He started his military service in July 2006 in the Kainuu Brigade in northeastern Finland. However, he was soon moved to the E-class. The Finnish Defense Forces have not told why he was then considered unfit or potentially unfit for military service. According to a fellow conscript, he was bullied during his time in the army, and he didn't learn shooting as quickly as his fellow conscripts did, but he had to practice it alone. And when he finally was allowed to shoot with real bullets, he was about to cause an accident when he shot against the rules behind his fellow conscript. According to another fellow conscript, or maybe the same one, Saari had said, "What a shame I forgot to aim." At the Polytechnic College that he was attending at the time of the shooting rampage, he was an average student in chemistry and physics. According to Evening News or Evening Messages, a Finnish evening tabloid newspaper, his acquaintances described Mr. Saari as a loner. However, one of his fellow dormitory students described him as a quiet but not a self-isolated student. On the other hand, he had been described as a sympathetic and likable person who had enjoyed studying in Kauhajoki. According to a female friend, Saari was not at all shy, but even talkative. He was also described as having been a social, not a self-withdrawing one, but a conversational student who got along well with his fellow students. According to the principal of the Nivala Vocational School or College that he attended before transferring to Kauhajoki, Nivala was neither bullied nor was he socially self-isolated. According to an acquaintance, however, Mr. Saari had sometimes been bullied, and according to the evening paper Iltalehti, which is another Finnish evening tabloid newspaper, he was bullied especially at the vocational college or school. Mr. Saari had also told one of his friends that he had been bullied a lot, especially at junior high school. Anyway, Mr. Saari entered through the school buildings via the basement. The shooting began at around 10 a.m. local time, when roughly 200 people were assembled inside the college because it was an exam day. The emergency services received their first call at 10:46 a.m. Mr. Saari was armed with a .22 LR caliber Walther or Walther P22 target semi-automatic firearm and homemade Molotov cocktails. He wore dark clothing and a balaclava or ski mask, so similar to those trench coats that Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold had worn some 9.5 years earlier in the Columbine High School massacre. The school's caretaker, Mr. Jukka Forsberg, who had several shots directed at him but survived, said the gunman was very well prepared and walked calmly. At first, Mr. Saari opened fire on a group of students who were taking a business studies exam and entered at least one other classroom. According to the 3 students who were able to escape the exam room, in which there were roughly 20 students taking the exam, Mr. Saari had approached his victims individually before shooting them. It was also said that he was reveling in the situation and was acting very aggressively. He encountered little resistance and massacre was concluded relatively quickly. He then covered the classroom in a flammable liquid believed to be petrol or gasoline and set the room alight. A student in an adjacent classroom, Miss Sanna Orpana, said that her class had heard shooting and a kind of a rumble like tables falling down. Ms. Orpana believed at the time that the noise may have been coming from a toy gun, and 2 other students went to investigate the noise. Mr. Saari shot at them, and the remaining students in Ms. Orpana's classroom hid under a table before running upstairs. At some point between 10:45 and 11 a.m., Mr. Saari ran down a corridor and threw a petrol bomb into a language laboratory. He then shot out all of the windows in the school's main corridor that extended through the building. During this time, he also took aim at Mr. Forsberg. A police van with 2 officers arrived a short time after the shootings began at around 11 a.m. They entered the yard of the college where they were shot at by Mr. Saari and forced to retreat. From around 11:45 to 12 noon, further police units bolstered by a number of armored vehicles began to arrive on the scene. They attempted to enter the building through the main corridor, but this assault was aborted due to the black smoke that was emanating from within the building. Having escaped the buildings in a variety of ways, including through doors and out of windows, some students found themselves impeded by a river adjoining the school. However, some were able to use rowing boats as a means of escape. Mr. Saari started fires at several other locations within the school buildings, and the fire in the exam room damaged some of the bodies so badly that they had to be identified from DNA and dental records. 9 of the victims were found in the exam room and 1 in a nearby corridor. It was later ascertained that this student had fled the burning classroom and then died in the corridor. 8 of the victims were female students, 1 a male student, and 1 was a male teacher. All of the students killed were in their 20s and the teacher was in his 50s. A 21-year-old woman was shot in the head, but through 2 operations was able to recover. A further 10 students were treated for minor injuries, including sprains and cuts from broken glass. All the victims were classmates of Saari, so contrary to Mr. Auvinen 10.5 months earlier, he hadn't randomly selected his victims, but he had apparently pre-planned whom to kill. Mr. Saari was claimed to have spoken to his friend named Rauno in a people dead. He was found alive, having shot himself in the head by the police at 12:30 p.m. Finnish time. He was taken to Tampere University Hospital, where he was treated for his gunshot wound, but he died a short time later. Rauno, this male friend of the murderer, stated in his interview that Mr. Saari had opted for a catering course to be surrounded by female students. Rauno said that Saari's behavior had begun to worry him over 2 years before the shootings, when Saari had begun expressing a fondness for guns and an admiration for the school shootings in the United States. He said that around 18 months or 1.5 years previously, so around the spring of 2007, Saari had sent him a message saying that he would carry out a school shooting the next day. Reportedly, Mr. Saari had denied being serious about carrying out his threat. A friend of Saari also reported that he had been seeing a psychologist in the months before shooting and had been obsessed with guns. Police said after their preliminary investigation in March 2009 that they had been unable to determine the underlying motives of Saari. They added that he had committed his crimes alone. 200 people had been interviewed during the investigation, none of whom had said they knew of Saari's plans. Contact with Mr. Auvinen was also ruled out. Yeah. So Finnish police had been informed about the YouTube videos, on one of which he had said, "You die next," pointing the gun towards the camera, in an anonymous tip-off on the Friday before the shooting. In other words, on September the 19th, while the shooting itself happened on Tuesday, September the 23rd, 2008. The police had talked to Saari and searched his home on the day before the incident on Monday, September the 22nd. Because he held a temporary weapons permit and apparently had, except for the one drunk driving incident, no previous criminal record, he tragically was not arrested. In August 2008, so conveniently some 1 to 1.5 months before the incident, conveniently for him and tragically for his victims, Mr. Saari had indeed obtained a license for a .22 caliber or 5.6 millimeter pistol. A police inspector was subsequently charged with dereliction of duty, and his court case began in September 2009. Mr. Saari had also posted another video on a Finnish social networking site in which he pointed a gun at the camera and said in English, "You will die next," followed by firing 4 shots in the direction of the camera. The video was unfortunately and tragically not available to the police when Saari was questioned. A police spokesperson commented, "The only video we saw was where he was shooting at the range. It was only afterwards that much more information came out." Police said that Saari would have been detained if they had known about this video at the time of the questioning. Police said that they believed Saari's videos were shot by someone else and that they were trying to identify who this person was. The case's chief investigator, Mr. Jari Neulanimi, speculated that the cameraman may have been the friend of Saari's who was murdered. Saari's account on IRC Gallery, which contained similar gun-wielding photos, was also suspended. The Finnish Interior Minister at the time, Ms. Anne Holmlund, announced that the actions of the police would be investigated. The Chief Superintendent or Police Commissioner of Finland, Mr. Mikko Paatero, said that Finnish police would increase their monitoring of YouTube and other social networking sites. And when asked whether similar attacks could take place in the future, he replied, "I badly fear it's possible." Okay, this is the end of the video, and may God have mercy on us all.